Welcome everybody to Cannabis Review. We've got a great episode for you today. I'm delighted to have Mr. Paul Pedersen, the CEO of Nextleaf, who've been called one of the world's most innovative cannabis extractors. So I'm delighted to have the man on the show to be able to talk about this topic that I know people want a lot of information on. So Paul, delighted to have you on. How are you keeping?
I'm doing good here in Vancouver, Canada. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And we were just saying there offline, you've got a pretty much similar lockdown to what we've got going on over here in Dublin. So it's great for you to take your time out and have a little chat with us. Do you want to give the audience a little overview of how you got started in the cannabis industry and where you kind of got to the Nextleaf story?
For sure. So I got, I guess, involved in the Canadian cannabis industry 7 years ago. Myself and Nextleaf's CFO, Charles Ackerman, we were both at a company called Peace Naturals. We were the first licensed producer in Canada. We got the first extraction license in Canada. Back then, Canada was only legal for medical use. And so obviously 2 years ago, Canada legalized recreational or adult use cannabis. But when I got started, it was medical only. I got started really, for me, was when Canada came up with this commercial medical program, and I realized, hey, this is an opportunity to get involved in the sector. I grew up in a place called Langley, British Columbia, where I think you either went away to college or you got into the illicit cannabis trade. So there was just a lot. It was, cannabis was around a lot growing up, and 2013, 2014 happens. So saw the opportunity, got involved. We worked for the founders. It was a husband and wife had founded Peace Naturals. We ended up selling the business to what is now Kronos Group, and obviously they 2 years later sold the business to Altria Tobacco, $2.2 billion. So for us, it was sort of bittersweet. We didn't want to sell. We wanted to continue building. Back in 2016, I had this vision for kind of where the future was headed, and having the first extraction license in Canada at Peace Naturals really kind of showed us, I think, where we felt things were going, and that was in the production of standardized molecules. And so when I founded Nextleaf with a couple of partners, and we had brought in technology from a individual that had been in cannabis for 15 plus years in the old medical program, had a lot of experience with the extraction and distillation of cannabinoids. Tremendous experience. Gentleman's name is Ryan Coe. He's gone on to author our 70 global issued patents. We also have 12 issued patents in the United States around the extraction, purification, and delivery of cannabinoids. Our company actually holds the second most issued patents of any cannabis company after Canopy Growth. For us, our business is really doing one thing, and that is taking lower quality dried cannabis, whether that's dried cannabis that's been sitting around for a year or product that just can't be sold in its herbal form. We have a large scale custom built plant. We didn't use off the shelf technology. We said 2 years ago when we were engineering it, we said we are going to build this similar like how you would build an oil and gas plant. So large scale, highly automated, and be able to have 3 to 4 operators run the system. And to give you an idea, we have our total company, we have 24 people. So we have about 10% of the headcount of the largest processors in Canada, but we can run about the same amount of material through. So what we've really built through automation is this low cost extraction platform to be able to produce standardized THC and CBD distillates. So we, through our patented process, take the dried cannabis, extract the cannabinoids, filter it, refine it, distill it. What we get at the end is a tasteless, odorless product. It's an API or an ingredient, as you said earlier, that we supply this cannabinoid-based ingredient to companies that manufacture edibles, vape pens, bottled oil. So we really, for us, we see the opportunity to monetize or commercialize our patent portfolio through really turning this lower grade material into a sellable ingredient that we think really is going to power a lot of the cannabis products in the world. as legalization sort of spreads and mass market consumption is more about not smoking, but consuming molecules through food and beverage.
Excellent. And I was reading recently about the US and Mexico patents that you'd gotten. Can you explain a bit about that? Even the Irish one that you were mentioned there, it's one of those things that's kind of very useful, I think, for the audience to know this kind of information.
So for us, we've really taken an IP heavy approach. We have a director of intellectual property, Karen Gray, who was previously at Philips Electronics, a lot of experience in the tech sector, right? In biotech, life sciences, pharma, there's a lot of work on IP. Cannabis, we haven't really seen that. I mean, other than Canopy Growth, there isn't really cannabis companies that have been focused on developing patents. And why I think, when we started this process 3 years ago of filing these patents, why I felt there would be a lot of value is when we looked around and we said, okay, well, who right now is filing cannabis patents? And it was all the big pharmaceutical companies, GW Pharma, Merck, Pfizer. And our strategy is file in the United States. So we have 12 US patents. And then as we file in the US, we then file internationally in jurisdictions that we think will be commercially viable through the legalization of cannabis over the next 20 years. And so recently got issued a patent in Mexico. Very few patents obviously have been filed in Mexico, despite the fact that that country is on track to become the largest federally legal cannabis market in the world later this year. Recently issued patents across Europe, Ireland, the UK, Germany. We think that these patents will be very, very significant when you look at GW Pharma and you look at sort of what's happening there and what GW Pharma is doing around patents. GW actually recently just got sued by Canopy Growth over a patent infringement lawsuit around Canopy's US patent around the CO2 extraction process. So that's the first patent infringement case. And so we think it's very interesting. And, for us, really our strategy is to build a great business and use these patents as sort of a defense mechanism against all these, tobacco companies, alcohol companies, and pharma that are coming into this space and don't always play nice with the little guys.
Yeah, no, well, that's great to see. I think that a lot of the industry would applaud that fact that it's not just the big pharmaceutical companies getting in these patents and taking up all the ground. Leads me kind of into the next topic that I wanted to bring up, and I know it's something you're a bit of an expert on. The pharmaceutical companies are obviously going to have these patents, but companies like yourselves that have vision and culture, how important is that, and how much of an extra margin is that ahead of these kind of bland, grey pharmaceutical companies in terms of creating and selling their products?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I mean, for us, we look at it like Battle of the Alamo. We've got 24 people. They're like family. People that have joined us from larger cannabis companies. We recently hired some key members to our team from Aurora, from Canopy. Again, multinational companies, folks that really believed in our vision and what we're doing. And I think for us, simply when you've got 24 people and you're battling, large multinational pharmaceutical companies, and I mentioned Canopy Growth. I mean, those guys raised $5 billion from big alcohol, and so I think we believe culture is so important in order to really compete as a small business. We need everyone's best, and I think. It's something that I love about our company is the culture of the team. It's people that love cannabis and have really signed on to get in the trenches with us and try to build a great business over the long term. And if we have to defend our intellectual property against some of the largest and nastiest companies out there. And I think what's great about this industry is that there's certainly no shortage of passionate people. And that's really, the founding of our company and this intellectual property that was developed in British Columbia over the last 20 years. And I think that's really resonated with people that have joined our team. And we've really tried to embrace the kind of the historical roots of cannabis culture and the founders that were really on the front lines of the war on cannabis prohibition.
Amazing. Yeah, as I said, I think it's a huge part of the industry that you'll see a lot more attention being paid to with the companies is the importance of the vision and the culture. The last topic I wanted to talk about, and it's something I know a couple of the extraction guys in Ireland who are pretty very skilled who are going to love me asking this question. So can you explain the different various extraction methods? Like over here, cold pressed isolate is the only thing that's legal, that's allowed on the shelves. So CO2, supercritical extraction, any that kind of stuff isn't allowed. So can you give me, let's say, your top 3 or 4 extraction methods and why they are the best?
Yeah, the method that we use that we think is the top is because it's the most economical for us to get standardized molecules at the end. And so we've built our extraction platform and our intellectual property around a system that we think is the most efficient to go from dried biomass into that high purity THC or CBD distilled molecule, that standardized molecule. You mentioned Ireland and cold press extraction. What you see, like in the United States, you see a lot of CBD isolate, for example, and CBD isolate you see because hemp is legal federally in the U.S. because of the Farm Bill. THC is not, and so their extraction method is really driven by the laws in that jurisdiction. I would argue the same as Ireland. For us, THC and CBD are exactly treated the same. They're regulated the same in Canada. So it's just about efficiency. It's what's our cost per molecule. We built this plant with it's an alcohol-based extraction method, but it's not about whether you use CO2 or ethanol at start. For us, it's about what that cost is, and really, it's about a whole system from extraction through filtration, refinement, and distillation. And so we really look at it as what allows us to pull out the most molecules at the end. So we really think that for efficiency, ethanol is where you want to be. I mean, obviously there's certainly value in other methods. CO2 extraction. That was what Canopy's patent was based around that I referenced earlier. And then I guess it sounds like that's what certainly companies like GW Pharma are using, or companies that are less concerned about the efficiency. There's also BHO extraction. We've got some IP around that. So those would be like differentiated products, shatters, butters, more kind of terpene rich finished products that you would choose that extraction method based on what your goal was for the end product. So that's really how I would sum it up. You're going to choose a method that is going to be based on the jurisdiction and what molecules are legal in that jurisdiction. And then 2, you're going to choose a method based on what your goal is for the product at the end.
Okay, I get that perfectly. In a dream scenario, is there a situation where we're starting to hear a lot about the craft growers of cannabis in Canada? Is there ever a scenario where there'll be craft extractors that'll be just using that much more higher spec method with a higher priced oil, or is it a standard model across the whole industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and this is what I say to people all the time. Like, if your goal is to make distillates, distillates are, like, there's different qualities of distillate, right? So there's like a higher quality distillate with less impurities, better color, smell. But there's lower quality distillates. But once everyone's going to a higher quality distillate, you're really dealing with a commodity in many ways. And so I think that makes it very hard for craft guys to compete. And quite frankly, we've raised $20 million and use that to engineer and build a large scale system that you just wouldn't build today. And so I think if you're in the craft space, you're not gonna go to a distillate. You're gonna look at being a processor on a more of a sort of a craft methodology, such as bubble hash, cold water extraction, dry sift, even BHO, where you're going to be kind of more strain specific. You're going to work with a craft cultivator to be able to really bring the uniqueness of these strains out. So is there a market for craft? Absolutely. I actually think that in this industry, there's really only 2 ways to survive. You've got to be very, very efficient at taking kind of lower quality dried cannabis and hemp inputs and turning that into a molecule and being able to put those molecules into finished products efficiently. And if you're not doing that on the processing side, then you're on the craft side, where you're very much focused on quality, strain specifics, and similar to kind of what you see in California. And I think there's room for everyone. But certainly in Canada, over the last 7 years, we've seen a lot of cannabis companies that have lost a lot of money because what they put out is low quality products that are expensive to produce, and that is non-sustainable. That business model doesn't work. So I think it's, the biggest thing I would say to anyone in Ireland getting started is make sure you start the right scale. I would say that with any international market, and just recognizing that legalization is a process that isn't going to happen overnight.
Yeah, no, that's it. Some of the top guys here seem to have been at it for 10, 12 years and seem to be refining their skills little by little in the hope that when it does become legal here, that we'll already have some expert Irish extractors for a company like yours to be able to come in and utilize the skilled workforce here. One of the questions I want to finally finish with, we're hearing a lot of talk about terpenes as of late. Am I right in saying cannabinoids are separated at different heat points? That's how they're extracted. How are terpenes extracted, and do you see that being a new ingredient over the coming future?
Yes and no. So people talk about like strain-specific terpenes a lot. I'm not a big believer in that, because the cost to add back in strain-specific terpenes makes it that you need to have a consumer for that end product that's willing to pay more for that, distillate or edible product that has strain-specific terpenes. I really look at distillate as an ingredient. Now, is there a lot of value in terpenes? Certainly, yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're processing a dried cannabis biomass that is rich in certain unique terpenes, you're not going to go to a distillate. You're going to go to like a live resin, or you're going to go to a finished product concentrate form that's going to be a sort of a whole plant extract. But I think terpenes are what gives cannabis strains the unique flavor and aroma. And so certainly there is going to be a market for on the premium side. I think on the ingredient side, I really believe that there's not. And that when you're adding an ingredient to food and beverage, you're really using the flavor of that carrier. And so that's sort of how we look at it. I mean, there's lots of R&D that we've done on terpenes, and I think the biggest thing that people need to remember, there's a lot of cannabis terms out there like full spectrum extract that are just marketing terms. They're not based on reality, where the issue with terpenes is they're very volatile. So when you decarboxylate oil to activate the THC molecules, which you would activate, you would decarboxylate when you light a joint or vaporize a flower. You would do that as part of the extraction process, right? So that the oil is activated. And when you decarboxylate, you heat it up. And by heating up terpenes, you're essentially losing the terpenes. They're highly volatile. So I think that's as the industry evolves, we get away from some of the kind of the pseudoscience sort of stuff, and based on science and what science tells us about how terpenes behave through heat and through an extraction process. It certainly takes us in a place around product development that we think is really gonna lead the way on with cannabis 2.0 products, both in Canada and then internationally as well.
Okay, amazing. Very last question. We hear a lot about CBN and CBG. Is there a new cannabinoid coming this year or next year that's going to be a contender for CBD?
I don't think so. Personally, I mean, I'd love to see a market for CBN, CBC, all the other kind of minor cannabinoids. I mean, right now we see a market for THC and CBD, both, in the adult use and the medicinal side. I use high CBN based cannabis products at night. I find it sedating. It's helped me to kick a sleeping pill habit that was pretty severe. So certainly, like, I'm a true believer in some of the minor cannabinoids, but I think we're still early. Like I think as an industry, we're still like first, second inning here. Yeah. And so there's a lot of education to kind of create demand. I just don't think like today there's a huge demand for minor cannabinoids. I think people love cannabis, people love CBD, and I think it's going to take some time for there to be a consumer and medical market for some of the less known cannabinoids.
Okay, amazing. That's been actually a hugely informative discussion. Thank you so much for taking part. I know the audience are going to be as informed as I was. It's a great chat. I'd love to get you on again in the near future at some stage, and hopefully Ireland will have slow marched its way towards legalization that little bit closer. If anybody wants to check out anything to do with Nextleaf Solutions, you can see the websites down there on the bottom. Yeah, thank you very again, Paul.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. You know, the chance to tell our story. I mean, we love this industry. You know, and you know, for us, we love to see folks in other parts of the world that are pushing forward and you know, moving the needle on legalization. I mean, this is the greatest you know, drug in the world because it doesn't kill anybody, and from a harm reduction standpoint, it's a heck of a lot healthier than opioids and alcohol. So you know, thank you for the work that you guys do, and you know, keep it up, and thanks for having me on your show.
Cheers, mate, and we shall chat again soon. Thanks everybody for watching.